The morning shift at a Chicago tech firm began like any other, with quiet keyboard clicks and the low hum of conversations drifting through the open office. Daniel Reeves sat at his desk, focused on debugging a complex system error while occasionally glancing at a small photo of his 6-year-old daughter taped beside his monitor. Being a single father wasn't easy, but he balanced it with quiet determination, rarely drawing attention to himself. His coworkers knew him as reliable, calm and deeply private. That calm was shattered when the glass doors at the entrance burst open and uniformed officers marched in with urgent purpose. At first, people assumed it was a mistake, or perhaps a visit related to another department. But when the officers walked straight toward Daniel's workstation, a wave of confusion spread across the floor. Conversations stopped, chairs turned. Daniel looked up slowly, his brow tightening as one of the officers called his name. Without resistance, he stood, his voice steady as he asked what this was about. The reply came cold and formal. He was being detained under suspicion of financial fraud involving company accounts. A murmur rippled through the office as disbelief filled the air. Daniel didn't argue or panic. He simply nodded once, though his eyes revealed a flicker of concern. As the officer stepped behind him and secured the handcuffs around his wrists, the metallic click echoed louder than it should have. His gaze drifted briefly to his daughter's photo, and for a moment, everything else seemed to fade. Co-workers watched in stunned silence, some whispering, others too shocked to react. A few exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether to believe what they were witnessing. His manager stood at a distance, arms crossed, deliberately avoiding Daniel's eyes. Investigators began searching his desk and computer, plugging in devices and collecting files. With practiced efficiency, Daniel remained composed, answering questions briefly but firmly denying any wrongdoing. The calm in his voice contrasted sharply with the chaos unfolding around him. As they escorted him through the office, every step felt heavier under the weight of silent judgment. The elevator doors ahead seemed like a final exit from everything he had built. Yet even in that moment, Daniel held on to a quiet belief that the truth would surface, no matter how impossible it seemed right now. The tension in the lobby was thick. As Daniel stood between two officers, his wrist still bound, his expression steady, despite the stares surrounding him. Just as the elevator door slid open, a confident voice cut through the silence. Wait, the word was sharp. Authoritative and instantly commanding, Federal Prosecutor Laura Mitchell stepped forward, her presence alone enough to shift the atmosphere. She had arrived to oversee the case personally, but the moment her eyes fell on Daniel, something changed. Her steps slowed, her gaze narrowing as recognition surfaced from years buried in memory. For a brief second, the professional mask she carried so well slipped. She studied his face carefully, connecting it to a moment long ago. A roadside accident, chaos, fear, and one stranger who had acted without hesitation. Daniel Reeves, the man who had pulled her injured brother from a crushed car and stayed until help arrived, refusing any reward before disappearing into the night. That memory clashed violently with the scene before her. Now there was no hesitation in her next move. "Remove the cuffs," she ordered, her voice firm and leaving no room for argument. The officers exchanged uncertain glances, caught off guard by the sudden command. "Ma'am, he's the primary suspect," one of them replied cautiously. Laura didn't raise her voice, but the authority in her tone deepened. "And I said remove them." Reluctantly, the cuffs were unlocked, the tension in the room shifting as Daniel slowly lowered his hands. He looked at her, confused but composed, clearly not recognizing her yet. Laura turned to the lead investigator, her expression now fully controlled, but her eyes sharp with suspicion. "I want every piece of evidence re-examined now." Within hours, the case that had seemed airtight began to unravel. Financial records showed inconsistencies that pointed away from Daniel toward a high-ranking executive who had quietly manipulated the system to cover his own embezzlement. Digital logs had been altered, timestamps shifted, and access trails forged with precision. But not perfectly. Laura oversaw every step, pushing her team to dig deeper, refusing to accept assumptions. Daniel remained cooperative throughout, answering questions with clarity, his calm demeanor never breaking despite the ordeal. By late afternoon, the truth stood undeniable. Charges against Daniel were dropped immediately, and the real culprit was taken into custody. As the officers stepped back, the atmosphere in the lobby changed from suspicion to quiet disbelief. Laura approached Daniel once more, her expression softer now. "You probably don't remember me," she said, a hint of gratitude in her voice. Daniel studied her for a moment, then shook his head slightly. She smiled faintly years ago. You saved someone very important to me. Daniel gave a small, humble nod, as if such actions required no recognition, as he walked free dignity intact. Laura watched him go, reminded that sometimes justice begins not just with evidence, but with knowing the kind of person someone truly is.